Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you're doing well. Do you like sparkly jewelry? I certainly do. I love sparkly crystals. And today we're going to be making a gorgeous sparkly necklace that sits right at the collarbone. It's one of my favorite styles. I find it very easy to wear because when you wear necklaces that are lower, you have to have the right outfit. But necklaces that sit at the collarbone can be worn with just about anything, and that's what I like about them. The colors that I'm going to be using are also very neutral, so you can wear them with anything as well. And I'm going to be using the beads that came in the Curated Bead box for the month of July. Can you believe that July is just around the corner? I certainly can't. I think summer starts in the US on June 20th. But it's amazing how quickly time has gone by. I'd be curious to hear your opinion about that. If you could leave some comments down below. I know I'm not alone. I know a lot of people are feeling time speeding up. Of course, it could be an age thing as well. I'm getting older. That could be it too. But anyway, guys, like I was saying, we're going to be using the beads that came in the Curated Bead box. And if you're not familiar with that box, I'll leave some information down below in the description section of this video. Just look down below, scroll down, and you'll see it. And don't forget that I always leave a list of all the materials down below as well, in case you want to buy those beads somewhere. You could always go to the dollarbead.com website and see if you can find them there. And before we get started, if you like my content and you're new, please think about subscribing to my channel because it really does help my channel and it helps me to stay motivated to create more videos for you. Also, don't forget that I always model my pieces at the end of this video, so stick around for that. And I can't wait to show you how to make this gorgeous jewelry set, a necklace, a pair of earrings, and a bracelet. So let's go ahead, turn the camera around, and we'll get started. And here we have Curated Bead box for the month of June. As you can see, the name of the box is Tree of Life. Let's go ahead and select the beads. Now, sadly, we're not going to be using this beautiful Tree of Life pendant. I was going to make a sun catcher using these crystals, but then I changed my mind. But I am going to use them to make a necklace. When I first saw these, I fell in love. These are listed as Faceted Bicone crystals, and they measure 14 by 8 millimeters. I also want to use these bead caps. These measure 6 millimeters in size, and they're in an antique gold color, as you can see. I want to use these beads right here. These are called Orange Blossom Spray Glass beads, and they measure 6 millimeters in size. And the reason I want to use these is because I think they're going to coordinate really well with the Faceted Bicone beads, since those are a peachy color. We will be using quite a few items from the Finding Starter Kit. Definitely the beading wire, the jump rings, the crimp beads, and probably the head pins to make some earrings. And I want to use a couple of these beads to make earrings. As you can see, it's a very long strand, so you could definitely make a bracelet with these if you wanted to. And that's it from this box. And here we have a few more items that are not in the box. We have some seed beads. These are size 8/0 seed beads, and they're round Miyuki beads. I also have a couple of clamshell covers. We're going to use those to hide the crimp bead once we squash it. And I'm going to go over it with you guys because there still seems to be a little bit of controversy about whether to squash a crimp bead or fold it. But we'll discuss that later on when we get to that step. And if I have time to make a stretch bracelet, I'll use this charm holder to hide the knot. So now that we've gone over the materials, let's go ahead and get started. These are the beads we're going to use for the bottom part of the necklace. I'm going to go ahead and arrange them first, and then I'll use seed beads to finish off the necklace. Now, if you've been following my channel, you may be familiar with these rods. These are called magic rods. I carry these in my Etsy store, and I use these to arrange my bead patterns. Obviously, you can use a beading board if you want to, but these come in really handy because they're made out of steel. They're pretty sturdy, but they're also very thin, so you can fit seed beads if you want to, along with bigger beads and bead caps. But the nice thing about these is that they come with stoppers at the ends. So once I load my beads, I'm able to bring my stoppers in, and then I can get accurate measurements. I do carry them in two sizes, 9 inches and 12 inches. These are the 9-inch rods, and I'm going to use one of them for the bottom part of the necklace, and then I'll use the other two for the seed beads. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to remove the stopper. These are silicone stoppers, and by the way, these do wear out with time. So the best thing to do is to use fresh stoppers every time you use these rods. I always include a baggie full of stoppers with every single one of my orders. So if you order these rods, you will get a whole bunch of stoppers. I think I'm going to start with the bead cap. Now these bead caps have very large holes. And I almost used leather cord today, but I wanted to use these little beads as well. And these little beads don't have big holes, so you'd have to use very thin leather cord. So the little beads are going to have bead caps just like this. And then the crystals are going to sit in between. Let me just show you. Just like that. I think that looks really, really cute. I love that. I guess I'm going to load a crystal now. And a bead cap. And a 6mm round. And another bead cap. And another crystal. So I'm going to keep loading this pattern until I get a length of about 6 inches, which means that I'm going to be using 6 of the faceted bicones. As you can see, I've loaded all my beads. Let me put a stopper on before I lose the beads. And now I can bring the stoppers in so all the beads are up against each other. And I think this looks really gorgeous. I love it. Let me measure it. It measures about 5 3/4 inches, and that's perfectly fine. So this is going to form the bottom part of the necklace. Now the box came with 8 of these crystals, so you could potentially use all 8 if you wanted to, if you wanted a longer necklace or if you wanted this portion to be longer. But I thought I'd save 2 of them to make earrings. So now I'm going to get my size 8 seed beads and load them onto rods as well. Let me put this off to the side. And we don't need any more of these. Here are my seed beads. I have another rod here. And I'm simply going to load as many seed beads as I need to make up the length that I need. And I'm thinking somewhere in the vicinity of 17 inches for myself. That's something you're going to have to decide on your own, depending on how long you want your necklace. I like to do it like this because it's much quicker for me to load the seed beads onto rods than to try to load one by one onto beading wire, if that makes any sense. And I'll show you later on how quick it is to offload from the rods. So let me keep loading these. As you can see, I've loaded all my seed beads onto the 2 rods. And what a coincidence that I had just enough beads to create 2 lengths of 5 3/4. That rarely happens with me. I usually end up with too many seed beads or not enough. But anyway, as you can see, I didn't have to count them. All I have to do is load them onto the rods and make sure the 2 lengths are the same. So anyway, if I add all 3 lengths, that's the equivalent of 17 1/4 inches. Now you have to take into account the clamshell covers, the jump rings, and the clasp. That's going to add an additional inch. So I'm going to go ahead and remove some seed beads from both of these rods. So my necklace is about 17 inches long, or at the collarbone. Like I said, it may be different for you. You're going to have to decide that on your own. So I'm going to go ahead and remove about 7 seed beads from each of these rods. 7 seed beads is about 1/2 inch. So now we just need to load these beads on beading wire. And here's the finding starter kit. We're going to need the beading wire and the crimp beads. I'll pull out the other items later on. The beading wire always comes taped like this. It's a little tricky to remove it. The best way to do it is to get some scissors and just go in there with the scissors like this and snip it. And then it comes right off. And there are usually 2 pieces of tape. Let me do the same thing with this one. I'm going to cut myself a 20-inch piece just to be on the safe side. You really don't need that much unless you're doing the fold over method with your crimp bead. And we're not going to do that today. Let me just measure 20 inches. Now let me just go over the method that we're going to be using today. Like I said in the beginning, we're going to squash the crimp beads. And here are 2 crimp beads that came in the Finding Starter Kit. As you can see, they're very tiny and they're round in shape, they're not tubes. You could potentially crimp these and do the fold over method, but that's really difficult with these tiny beads. It's much easier to just squash them. And I'm going to go over that method with you in just a second. In order to demonstrate how reliable the squashing method is compared to the fold over method, I'm going to use these sticky notes. Let me just cut one in half. I'm going to pretend this is a crimp tube. Okay. And here's a piece of nylon cord. We're going to pretend this is the beading wire. Now with the traditional fold over method, what you would do is take the end of the beading wire and thread it back through. And you would create a loop just like that. Ideally, you want to separate your beading wire so it looks like this, and then you would crimp it just like that. This is how you would do the traditional crimping method. Now if you'll notice, each strand has its own little separate channel, and when you crimp it, you would squash the crimp bead like this and then fold it over. Okay, now my method is very similar. Here's the other half. I'm going to take the beading wire and thread it through, and I'm going to squash it just like that. As you can see, the final result is exactly the same whether you have 2 pieces going through, each one in its own little separate channel, or whether you have 1 piece of beading wire going through in 1 channel only. In other words, the crimp bead is squashed right over the beading wire like this, securing it in place. Let me just thread this one back through. And here I have the same exact situation. The crimp bead is surrounding both pieces of beading wire. And when I fold it, you can see that it's the same exact thing, guys, okay? Whether you have 1 piece of beading wire within the tube or 1 piece of beading wire within each section of that tube. I hope I'm not confusing you. But there's a lot of misinformation out there about what's right and what's wrong. The other thing that people are worried about is the beading wire getting crushed. Well, you're doing the exact same thing when you do the fold over method. The beading wire is going to get squashed. The key is to squash the crimp bead just enough, but not too much, so it doesn't break the beading wire. I hope that makes sense. I don't know how else to explain it, but one thing I can tell you is that squashing the crimp bead is very, very secure, and you can add a little bit of glue inside your clamshell cover if you're worried about it. Here are my clamshell covers. Now we're not going to attach them just yet because I want to load these seed beads onto the beading wire first. I have a little clip here. You can use a bead stopper if you want to. Let me just put these off to the side. I'm going to start by loading the seed beads. To offload from the rod, you have to hold onto this end like this. Remove your stopper carefully. And now I'm going to grab several at a time and load them directly onto my beading wire. Just like that. As you can see, it didn't take that long to load these seed beads. The rods hold the seed beads in perfect alignment, so I can offload in multiples and get them onto the beading wire quickly. For me, it's a lot faster to do it that way than to try to load 1 seed bead at a time using beading wire. So now I'm going to load these beads. And once again, you want to hold on to this end of the rod, remove the stopper from this end. And I can actually grab the bead caps and the bead at the same time. As you can see, I've loaded all my beads. So now before I crimp off the ends, I'm going to take it to the mirror to make sure it's the right length. Let me go ahead and do that and I'll be right back. I'm back and I did end up removing some seed beads. Once I held it up against my chest, I decided I wanted it to be a little bit shorter. That's why it's a good idea to use bead stoppers and do the crimping at the end. Sometimes I do crimp off one end and then I load the beads, but I usually only do that if I'm making multiple numbers of the same necklace and I know exactly how many beads I need. So now let's go ahead and crimp off the ends. I'm going to load a clamshell cover on first and I'm going in from the bottom. Just like that. I'm a bit reluctant to show you close-ups because somebody left a comment in my last video that my close-ups were too close. So I'm trying to strike a good balance with my filming. So anyway, now we're going to load a crimp bead. Just like that. Using chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab that crimp bead. And before I squash down, I want to make sure that it's nice and straight in between the jaws of my pliers. You don't want that beading wire to be sitting at an angle inside that crimp bead. So now I'm just simply going to squash it like this. And I like to squash both sides of the crimp bead. So I'm going to come over to this side now and squash it. And like I said, you don't want to squash it too much because you could break that crimp bead and you don't want to do that. So now we're going to test it. As you can see, I'm pulling pretty hard and it's not going to come off. So now it's safe to cut off the excess beading wire. You could potentially put some glue in there if you wanted to, if you feel a little bit unsure about this method, but I never do and I've never had any problems with it. So now we're going to close it. Then we finish closing it with my pliers. And there it is. As you can see, it gives you a very professional look. So now I'm going to move my beads down. I'm going to load another clamshell on this end, going in from the bottom, and a crimp bead. And you want to check for spaces. You don't want any spaces in between your beads, but at the same time, you don't want it to be too stiff. Let me just open up this clamshell to make it a little bit easier. I need to be able to reach in there. So once again, I'm going to reach in here and grab that crimp bead, and I'm going to grab the beading wire as well. And now I'm going to go ahead and squash it. Let me test it. It's on there pretty good. Cut off the excess beading wire. And now I'm going to close the clamshell. You do want to be careful because you don't want to dent the metal of the clamshell cover. And that's all there is to it. Pretty easy. Here's a lobster clasp and 2 jump rings from the Finding Starter Kit. The jump rings are 6mm in size. Let me open one up. Attach the lobster clasp. Let me attach it to the loop of the clamshell cover and close it up. You do want to make sure you close them really well because you don't want the loop of the clamshell cover to slide through the gap. And that's one of the reasons I like to use clamshell covers with 2 loops. I think the ones with 2 loops are a little bit more secure. Let me open up this jump ring now. Attach it to this end and close it up. As you can see, you get a very professional finish. And I love the sparkle of this necklace. I think it's very pretty. So now let me go ahead and move on to the bracelet. Here are the beads for the bracelet. As you can see, I have the 8mm crackle beads and I have the 6mm smooth rounds. I also have a charm holder and I have 2 bead caps, and I am going to be using one of my magic rods. I always like to start with the focal part of the bracelet, and I'm going to be using these beads right here. So here's what I was thinking. I was thinking of having a bead cap at the end and then these 5 beads. And then another bead cap at the other end, like this. I think that looks really cute. And now I'm going to load some of these 6mm beads. I want a 7-inch bracelet, so I'm going to stop right now and measure this. So far I have about 3.5 inches worth, and I need to add more beads on the other side, but I also have to take into account the charm holder, which I think measures about 1/4 inch. Let me add a couple more beads. I'm going to put my stopper on and switch to this side. Let me separate these beads. Quite a few of them are actually stuck together like this. Let me go ahead and measure it before I go any further. I'm at 6 1/4, so I think I'll add another bead on each end. And I'm going to add the charm holder as well. Let me put the stopper on. And let me measure it. I'm at exactly 7 inches. How lucky can I be? So now I'm just going to load it on stretch cord, and I'm going to use the stretch cord that came in the Finding Starter Kit. Let me remove these beads. I'm going to cut myself a 12-inch piece. I like to have enough stretch cord so I can do the knotting. And you place a clip at this end. And once again, I'm going to offload from the rod. So I'm going to hold on to this end and slide the stopper off this end. I'm going to slide the charm holder on first. This is where I'm going to hide the knot. It has a nice big hole. Once again, I'm offloading in multiples. It's a little tricky because the stretch cord is kind of soft and it curls up a little bit at the end. So it's a little tricky to feed it through the beads sometimes. So now that I've loaded the beads, I'm going to go ahead and knot it off. Now before we knot it off, we need to stretch it. I should have done that before. You want to make sure you stretch it before you knot it off, because with time, stretch cord does stretch on its own, and then you end up with a loose bracelet. So let me show you how to do this. I'm going to take my left side, cross it over the right side, and take this end and go over like this and under, and pull. If you'll notice, I'm holding onto the bracelet with my fingers, and I'm also holding onto the ends. And now I'm going to take the right side and go under the left side, and I'm going to take this end and go through the loop twice. So that's once. And that's twice. And once again, I'm holding onto the bracelet with my fingers, these fingers here, but I'm also holding onto the loop. And now I'm going to go ahead and pull. And you want to pull the bracelet as well as the ends. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take the left side, go over the right side, and take this end and go through the loop twice. So that's once, and that's twice, and pull. You want to make sure that knot is nice and small. And that's pretty much it. I have some GS Hypo cement that I'm going to apply to the knot. It has a very nice thin applicator, as you can see. And I'm simply going to put a little dab on the knot. You don't really need that much. Let me put some on this side as well. And now I'm going to go ahead and snip off the excess. I'm not going to cut too close to the knot though. And now let me go ahead and slide that knot inside the charm holder. So now the knot's inside and you don't see it. Now before you start wearing it, you want to let it dry. I usually let it dry at least 24 hours just to make sure. And here I have a little charm. As you can see, it's a leaf charm. And I also have a 4mm jump ring. These two items did not come in the box. They're from my own stash. Let me open up the jump ring. Is this adorable or what? I think it's super cute. Let's make a quick pair of earrings now. Here are the materials for the earrings. As you can see, I've already made one, and it's very simple and easy to make. The head pin and the ear Y hook are from the Finding Starter Kit, and I have 2 bead caps. I also have the Faceted Bicone crystal and the 8mm crackle bead. So let me show you how to do this. I'm going to thread on a bead cap. You do want to make sure that the head pin isn't going to slide through that hole, and it looks like it's big enough, so that won't happen. And now let me thread on this bicone bead and this bead cap and the 8mm bead. Very simple. Using flat nose pliers, I'm going to grab the pin right where the bead is. I do want to leave a little bit of space there because I need to bend that pin. And now I'm going to snip off the excess pin, leaving myself about 1/2 inch, something like that. Using round nose pliers, I'm going to grab the pin so that it's flush, and I'm simply going to loop it. You want to make sure you close your loop, and you also want to make sure that it's nice and straight. Just like that. Let me open it up. Slide the ear Y hook into the loop and close it. So there's a quick pair of earrings. Let me bring out the entire set now. So here's the entire set, and I'm pretty happy with it. I think it looks really cute. It's a very quick project, very easy to make, and you end up with a very elegant but fun looking necklace and bracelet and earring set. As always, I'm going to go ahead and put it on and show you what it looks like. So let me do that and I'll see you in a few moments. I really love this necklace, but you know what I love about it the most? That it's easy to make. It really is. So if you're a beginner, I encourage you to try making this beautiful jewelry set. Just follow my steps and you can't go wrong. It does take a little practice to do looping and crimping and all that kind of stuff, but just keep practicing and I'm sure you'll get it eventually. So anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Have a great day and I'll see you next time. Bye.